Hello, my dear viewers. I hope you're all doing fine. I once again welcome all of you to my lecture series. Today, I'm presenting my fifth video on Indian polity, and today we are exploring the core portion of the Indian Constitution, that is part 3, titled The Fundamental Rights of Indian Citizen. And on this topic, that is fundamental rights, I'll be giving 3 lectures. The first lecture will be just introduction, introducing what fundamental right is all about, and the next video will be on the main video, that is different rights available to the Indian citizen. And part 3, I'll be explaining article wise, article 12 to 35. That'll be my second video, that is next. And my third video on fundamental rights will be based on article 32. So if the fundamental right is taken away from you, so what will be the consequences? What are you supposed to do? So based on article 32 of the Indian Constitution, I'll be giving you the remedial measures in case like your rights are taken away. There are certain remedies. So this is how I have divided my lectures into 3 segments. So yes, let's start. Part 3 contains very comprehensive package of rights explained in most detailed manner under Article 12 to 35, and that's why Indian fundamental rights are the most extensive and elaborate rights in the whole world. No other country's constitution explains its citizens' rights in such a detailed manner like the Indian Constitution. Again, some are mistakenly confused that fundamental rights starts from Article 14, right to equality. But let's remember Article 12 and 13 all the time, because in order not to confuse the entire flow of fundamental rights, you will need to understand Article 12 and 13, the definitions given by Article 12 about what is law, and Article 13, what is the state. We will need to understand this too in order to have to understand the overall fundamental rights till Article 35. The father of the Indian Constitution, Bhimrao Ambedkar, have said fundamental rights is that part which is mostly or highly criticized within the Constitution. And this lecture I would like to dedicate to all the citizens of India. Fundamental rights is important not just for the students for the sake of passing examinations, but all the Indian citizens must know the rights irrespective of who you are. You may be a student, a teacher, a police, a driver, a farmer, anything. This is the key of the Constitution to all of us. So if you are a citizen of India, we all need to know what is fundamental rights. The fundamental rights of India was inspired from American Constitution Bill of Rights of 1791. Americans were the first people in the history of the world to mention rights in a written document. The framers of the Indian Constitution did not borrow rights from the American Constitution. Remember, we need to be very clear, confusion-free, that Indian framers did not borrow rights from America. What they borrow is the concept, the idea of incorporating citizens' rights in a written document. They borrowed that. Otherwise, the nature, the content of rights are two separate and different types of rights that we find in America and India. They are not similar. And even the title, the nomenclature is two different things. In America, it is called the Bill of Rights. Again, in India, it's called the Fundamental Rights. And another important thing is that the Indian Fundamental Rights is the Magna Carta of India, just like the Magna Carta of England of 1215, which is the earliest known text that establishes constitutional law, even limiting the power of kings and queens by establishing principles that everyone, including the king, was under the law, was subject to the law. Similarly, in India, fundamental rights serves as a check against the tyranny of the state and the government. Fundamental rights is called the Magna Carta of India because of the presence of Article 32, the most important article according to Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, the father of the Indian Constitution. Presence of Article 32 makes fundamental rights Magna Carta or justiciable rights, meaning if your rights are taken away by state and the government, you can still fight and get back your rights by going and visiting the court. Now, this state and the governments are mentioned because they are the power holders. They exercises power. So, if using the power, if individual rights, citizens' rights are taken away by the state, by the government, then what is the assurance? The assurance is that you can still fight and get back your rights, and that is why we call it Justiciable or Magna Carta. Now, once again, I have there's an overlapping point here that is again repeating here. One of the most extensive rights available. There is no other constitution. You will not find it. Similar to India, the rights been explained in such an extensive manner. Now, why is it so elaborate? Because it did not just provide rights, but explains how it should be used. Explanation is more detailed, remember, all the time. Manner, how it should be spent, that right has to be spent. So that's why the fundamental rights are in full chapter 3. Almost all the basic rights of an individual you will find here, it's covered here, just like right to life, speech, right to movement, right to reside, right to hold provision, etc., etc., and so on and so forth. And when to use those rights, how to use, where to use, such rights are all detailed oriented. That's why it's very much detailed. And for the civil service aspirant, you must, in fact, this because of this lengthy explanation of our fundamental rights, what you can do is you can use shortcuts or you can use keywords to remember fundamental rights without memorizing. And the aim, both the immediate and ultimate aim of the fundamental rights is to bring the rule of law and rule of man. That's the purpose of creating fundamental rights for India. Majority of rights were created for the Indian nationals, Indian citizens. Therefore, at least in the eyes of the law, citizens are adjusted as equal. So fundamental rights does not discriminate one citizen against the other. However, it discriminates a citizen from foreign nationals. So that is obvious and that is understood. Second important thing is that fundamental rights serves as a cornerstone for securing a lot of good things like equality, dignity of the individuals, larger public interest, and unity of the nation. So fundamental rights helps secure those important objectives. Fundamental rights also promotes political democracy, just like directive principle of set policy, trying to bring in economic democracy to the people of India. Similarly, fundamental rights attempts to promote political democracy, first of all, by vesting the supreme political power on the people, even though that power may be exercised by the state or by the government. Second, creating space for democratic participation. Thirdly, transparent flow of information to the people. Fourth, safeguarding minority voices, providing checks on the government, and so on and so forth. In all of these discussions, people are at the center stage. In a democracy, people's power must not be underestimated. We cannot underestimate people's power in a democracy. And we can cite the recent incident in Nepal where people took up the power in their own hands. Can be cited as one example, even though people must resort to those steps, those actions as the last option or the ultimate step when all other possibilities failed. And also not forgetting that people should use political power for a good, wise reason and wise purpose. Not for the people should not unmindfully use those powers for destruction, but for building the nation and making it better. Fundamental rights limits the power of governments resting at both the center and the state. It goes below the state also. We have municipalities and we have panchayat. Goes till the panchayat. So any institution which are run by the government, it limits the power of any such institutions by the fundamental rights. And it tries to prevent establishment of authoritarian despotic rule by placing as a check on their exercise of their power. Citizens specific rights, we have five citizen specific rights where only and only citizens can enjoy. So Article 15, Article 16, Article 19, 29, 30 cannot be shared with outsiders, cannot be shared with foreigners or aliens. So in all of these articles 15, 16, 19, 29 and 30, the word citizen will be used, has been used. And in all other articles, the word person is used. So there are two types of articles, there are two types of rights. One is only for the citizens, and the rest are both for the citizen also, for the aliens also. Except is mentioned enemy aliens. In fact, aliens also two. That one is friendly aliens and other is enemy aliens. So if you're wondering as to what is the definition of enemy aliens, then to be considered as an enemy, India should be at that time, India should be war with that country. So the citizen of that country will be considered as enemy to India. So that's about that. Why is Indian rights called fundamental? Why is it called fundamental rights? The answer is quite simple, because the rights are basic only. It's not an extraordinary rights granted to the Indian citizens by the constitution, but something that we need every day. It's just a basic natural rights which are which are fundamental needs of the citizens, and which a citizen cannot live without. So that is why, because these are the basic rights only. Basic rights in a sense, like it talks about right to life, right to speech, right to free movement, right to stay, reside, right to big a provision. So something, the right which a citizen cannot live without, and that is why it is called the basic. It's just a basic right. So that is one reason, one huge reason why it's called fundamental. And it is also fundamental because even though that's basic rights only, those rights are incorporated first of all, and then those are duly protected by the Constitution of India. And that's why, even though it's basic rights only, it's like protected through Article 32 of the Indian Constitution. That is another reason why the fundamental rights of India is called fundamental. But it, having said all that, it forms the fundamental rights, forms the pillar, or you can call it also the core of the Indian democratic society. And we let's remember that fundamental rights are prerequisite. It's a necessity that for all-round development of any individual, any citizens, we need fundamental rights, those basic rights for all-round development. Because Indian rights are a mixture of so many things. Some rights are material, some rights are moral, some rights are intellectual. Also, we have right to education. Some rights are spiritual because we have religious rights, so on and so forth. So these are prerequisite for all-round development of an individual. And sometimes it is also called as, it is also considered as aiming to overturn the inequities of past social practice of India, and helps prevention of gross violation of human rights. Now let's discuss some core principles or features of Indian fundamental rights. The first is justiciable, as mentioned earlier also, because of presence of Article 32 and Article 226. So citizens, at any point of time, if our rights are restricted or taken away, we have two options. We can directly go to Supreme Court through Article 32, or we can go to High Court also, making use of Article 226. And the assurance by the court is that they will try to protect the rights of the citizens if it's a fundamental rights. So if it's a fundamental rights, and if it has been restricted or taken away, then the court will issue writs, 5 in total, and they can safeguard our rights. They will ensure that the rights are given back to us, to the litigants. So that is why it is called, once again, it's called justiciable rights. And but then it's not absolute. Constitution did not guarantee any absolute right to the citizen of of India. So restrictions are there. Restrictions are also three types: constitutional based restrictions. In fact, the constitution has a lot of explanation how to make use of the rights and in what occasion and when to make use of the rights. So these are very detailed written and detailed explanations are given. So in that explanation you will see a lot of limitation on the rights. So some critics says right hand provides the rights and left hand takes away the rights. So the restrictions are, first of all, it's constitutional based. Within the constitution a lot of restrictions are there. Next important thing is that Supreme Court time to time through its judgment and through its pronouncement also restrict citizens' rights, that we need to understand. And the third one is Parliament can also make certain rules which can be detrimental to the fundamental rights. So we can just club with this one, because fundamental rights are not fixed. It's not a sacrosanct, or it's not fixed. It can be amended. So that amendment can be done by our parliamentarians, our sovereign parliament. They can amend the rights of the Indian fundamental rights, and maybe through those amendments the changes, or they can modify the rights, fundamental rights. So in fact the law, the judgment and pronouncements are not just by the Supreme Court but even the High Court. If we should remember, both Supreme Court and High Court, they might restrict fundamental rights through their pronouncement or through their judgment in certain cases. And the next one is fundamental rights, unlike other countries, just like America, can also be suspended. It's not that we do not enjoy fundamental rights permanent. It's temporary, and can any point of time it can be suspended. And that when is that suspension happening? During emergency, that is external emergency, maybe because of external aggression, or maybe when India is engaged in war with other countries. So those are understood, those are emergency situations. So in fact the rights may be suspended, rights may be sidelined for the safety of the Indian nation as a whole. So that maybe that is understood. But during that time also, two articles will always and always and always be there. So Article 20 and Article 21. So these are like when, if you are arrested, what are you supposed to do? If not you, sorry, if we are arrested, what are we supposed to, what rights are we supposed to avail? That's one thing, Article 20. And Article 21 talks about right to life. So emergency happens doesn't mean that somebody can just take anybody's life. Life is precious. So Article 21 gives us the right to life. So these are permanent rights that all the citizens we can enjoy both during normal time and during abnormal time. So these are the core features of Indian fundamental rights. Altogether, they were initially in the year 1950. Altogether, it was fundamental rights were seven in total, including Article 31, which is missing today, right to property. In fact, this has been a huge problem for India. You will find a lot of issue, a lot of case connected with this right to property, like the Kolaknath cases or Kisavanda Bharti case, so on and so forth. In fact, major issue, major cases handled by the Supreme Court is connected with right to property. So this is one reason that because of its controversial nature, it was removed. Now, with that removal, we have only six fundamental rights, that is right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, and the last one, the most important rights according to Bhimrao Ambedkar, that is right to constitutional remedies. Now, to wind up my discussion, we can briefly highlight the features of Indian fundamental rights. So, fundamental rights are both natural and legal. It's natural because necessary and indispensable for the promotion of human personality. Next is it is legal right also, binding. It becomes binding on the government in the state. It may be central, it may be provincial, district, local, or anything which is connected with government. It becomes binding on them not to exercise control or restrict the rights of the citizens. Next, it is a claim rights also. Every citizen or every person must be in a position to claim those fundamental rights, and they are also called as a liberty rights because it assures. This is the assurance is that certain liberty, in a sense like thought, expression, assembly, associations. These are why it's called the liberty rights also. Many fundamental rights are negative because it enforces limitation on the power holders, the government. And it can be positive also, conferring certain privileges, especially to the weaker section of the Indian societies, the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and other backward classes. For them, it's a positive by giving them certain extraordinary rights in the form of protective discrimination. And fundamental rights are also individual in a sense like equality, freedom, and individual beings. These are all, it talks about individual rights, and it can be group also. So some the rights can be individual, it can be group in a sense like a lot of religious institutions and denominations rights are also been explained. Cultural, in fact, minorities, cultural or ethnic minorities, or and so on and so forth, are also explained under the Indian constitutional fundamental rights. So these are what the division of fundamental rights is. And viewers, with that, I'm very happy that I have come to an end of my presentation. Again, I will see you again very soon in my next segment 2 of my presentation on we will get to know the real um, rights, fundamental rights, starting from right to equality in my next video. Thank you so much and good night.